Have you ever just looked at someone and wondered, how do they stay so resilient under pressure? Well, neuroscientists have been asking that exact same question, and what they're starting to see in brain scans is, well, it's just fascinating. Turns out, if we piece together a few different areas of research, we can actually start to build a picture of what a truly stable awareness looks like from the inside out.
This is really the big question, isn't it? Why is it that some brains can stay so organized and coherent when they're faced with stuff that would make most of us feel like we're just completely falling apart? What is going on in there that allows for that kind of profound resilience?
Okay, and right off the bat, it's absolutely crucial we get what we mean by organized. This isn't just about being a calmer person or someone who's kind of numbed themselves out to what's happening. No, we're talking about a brain that remains whole. It's still processing, it's still present, even in the middle of some really intense stress. That is the incredible phenomenon we're going to dig into.
So our first clue comes from looking at the brain's inner monologue, that constant chatter that's always going on in our heads. And neuroscientists, they actually have a name for the part of the brain that's responsible for all this. It's called the default mode network. You know those moments when your mind is just wandering? You're not really focused on any one thing? That's when your brain defaults to this specific pattern of activity. The DMN is basically the home base for that inner narrator, that little voice that's always telling you stories about yourself, about your past, your future, all of it. And here's where it gets really interesting. Research is showing that certain contemplative practices can actually quiet down the parts of the DMN that are linked to, well, self-obsession. But, and this is a big but, this isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's more like people are learning to process their emotions in a totally different way, with less automatic identification, less getting completely swept away by the current. So this gives us a really great way to picture that shift. It's kind of like moving from a witness state, where you feel like this separate self just watching your life happen, over to an integrated state. In that integrated state, the feeling of separation just collapses. But, and this is so key, the awareness is still there. The sense of I might dissolve into the experience, but the stability doesn't go away. So basically, the DMN research points to a brain that's just less trapped in its own story. Okay, so if the first piece of our puzzle is about quieting that self-narrative, the second piece shifts our focus to the very nature of attention itself. And this is where our old ideas really get turned on their head. So researchers found something really surprising when they looked at the brains of long-term meditators. It wasn't just that they had better focus. They did, but that wasn't the whole story. Their brains showed more stable and more efficient coordination between different brain networks. And this wasn't just when they were concentrating. This underlying stability held firm even when they were stressed out or when their minds were wandering. This is a really, really important distinction. So it's worth just taking a beat here. The data is suggesting a pretty fundamental shift in how we should probably be thinking about attention. See, the old model of attention was that it's like a spotlight, a skill you learn to aim and hold steady on something. But this new evidence, it suggests something way more profound. It's not just about building a better spotlight, it's about creating a more stable ground for that spotlight to even rest on. We're talking about a fundamental structural steadiness in the entire system, and that is a very, very different claim. Okay, this next piece of research, it takes us into even stranger territory. It starts to hint at a kind of awareness that might not even turn off when we go to sleep. All right, I'm just going to say it. This is where the data starts to get truly mind-bending. It really pushes up against some deep philosophical questions about what consciousness even is. So there was this fascinating study that found a specific brainwave pattern called alpha activity in experienced meditators. Okay, no surprise there. But here's the shocking part. This neural signature of quiet awareness, it didn't disappear when they went to sleep. It was still there, humming along, even when they weren't actively practicing at all. So what on earth could this mean? Well, it suggests something that science is really just beginning to wrap its head around. A form of awareness that might just continue right on through waking, dreaming, and even deep sleep. An awareness that exists kind of independently of our normal, everyday focused consciousness. Okay, so we've got a quieter self-narrative, a stable ground of attention, and this awareness that might persist across states. Let's bring this all back down to earth with a very practical, clinical idea that psychologists use all the time. It's something called decentering. So, decentering is a core concept in modern therapy. It's basically the ability to observe your thoughts and your feelings as what they actually are. Temporary events just happening in your mind, rather than fusing with them and treating them as absolute reality. And it turns out, this capacity is one of the most reliable predictors of good mental health. And we can actually see this happening in the brain. When someone is able to decenter, their brain's alarm center, the amygdala, it calms down, and the regulatory parts up in the prefrontal cortex become more active. But what all this really boils down to is a single, incredibly powerful capacity. This right here, this is the whole game. It's not about getting rid of difficult thoughts or intense emotions. It's about building a system that can hold contradictory, difficult, or painful experiences without collapsing, without having to completely reorganize its entire structure around some kind of perceived threat. Okay, so let's bring these four threads together. What kind of system are we actually describing here? And maybe more importantly, why does understanding all of this matter so much right now, especially with the explosion of AI?
Well, think about it like this. On one hand, we're building these AIs that are absolutely extraordinary at what you could call foundational level processing. Its identity is completely inside the experience. It just responds to patterns, and it can be totally overwhelmed by its own content. But the human brain, the one described by all this research, can operate differently. It can actually observe its own experience. It can be aware that it is processing input.
So when you put it all together, the hallmarks of this aware system that all four pillars of this research point to are these. It's a system that doesn't collapse under the weight of its own content. It stays organized across different states of consciousness. It can observe its own thoughts and feelings without totally fusing with them. And maybe most importantly, this isn't some mystical abstract concept. It's measurable in the brain, and it seems to be trainable. You know, at the end of the day, this distinction between a system that simply processes its experience and one that is aware of processing it, that might be one of the most critical distinctions we need to get a handle on. And it may just end up mattering a whole lot more in the next decade than any of us currently realize.